Hello, puppies and kittens. Going to do something a little bit different today. I've got Kegs on. He's one of my patrons. He's been on the channel before, asking a handful of questions on paleontology, and that's what he wants to do again today. He has a number. You're in New Zealand, are you?
I'm from New Zealand, but I live in Australia.
Okay. All right then. Where at in Australia?
Sydney.
Sydney. Okay. All right then. Let's go. Let's go ahead. Introduce yourself and let's get started.
I'm just a layman that has a lot of questions, and unfortunately, I'm not able to find substantial answers easily. So I just thought I'd come straight to Aaron.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, I know the same dilemma that you have. I mean, I am very fortunate that I have phone numbers and stuff for scientists that can help me out in whatever specialty. So go ahead.
Okay, the first question was what causes the delineation between the rock layers, and like why does one layer stop abruptly for another one to start on top?
Well, they don't. You have periods of deposition that are like a different type of environment. When the environment changes, the type of deposition will change. One of the things that they teach you in historical geology is like how beaches move. You know, you always imagine a beach being sand, right? And then you're going to have a certain type of rock underneath the sand, and then of course when the water gets deep enough that it's no longer a beach, now you've got a different type of deposition that's coming down on top of that sand. So now you've got silts, right? So you've got mudstone, and then it's covered with sandstone, and then it's covered with siltstone, and so forth. And so these are these different layers. That's one of the ways that can happen. I mean, you can also have areas that'll completely dry out. You know, we've seen where land masses will rise and fall, sea levels will rise and fall for different reasons, largely having to do with temperature and that sort of thing. And so there are places that we can tell used to be under calm, placid water for a long time. Good example of that here in Texas, our biggest mountain is actually not a mountain; it's a coral reef.
I've
And
heard of that, yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to remember how tall
New
it
Zealand's
is.
the same. New Zealand has fossils found in the mountains and stuff there. Like they used to be underwater, is what I mean.
Well, I mean, the mountain is a coral reef, the whole thing. So it's, I don't know, 2,000 feet. It's not gonna, I'm trying to remember what the metric measurement is, but anyway, this massive mountain is entirely coral. So how long does it take to build up coral, right? I mean, it's just hundreds of thousands of years to build something this big as a coral reef. You know, this massive. And so we know that the waters were calm, and they were, you know, and it was a nice environment, a very steady environment for a really long time. But then this would be about the time that the West Coast became the West Coast. They kind of collided with North America. Like California didn't. California used to be an island. You know, they always tell you how there's going to be an earthquake and California will become an island. Well, it started out that way, and then California, crashed into the North American continent, and a number of other things that caused this continent to rise a bit, and so the water level dropped by obviously at least 2,000 feet. And so all that environment changed from deep marine to arid, semi-arid, and so you have a completely different type of deposition. Now things are being blown around by the wind rather than being carried by rivers, or different types of deposition for different types of environments. And so the environment changes, the type of deposition can change, and then it's also a toss-up between. There's a challenge. There's a balance between deposition and erosion. See, both are happening all the time. It's just which one is happening faster at that moment and for how long. So in some places in the world, I mean, you're going to have all these layers. In some places, the layers will be very thin or it'll be absent altogether, certain layers, because they've undergone excessive erosion. So an entire layer might erode, and part of the layer below that might erode, and then have further deposition put down on top of it. So
But I thought you said that throughout the world, you get the same rock layers laid down in the same order. How can it be uniform over the world if there's different environments causing different erosion events and such?
You get the same type of index fossils, regardless.
Okay.
When you have like Cambrian fauna or Jurassic fauna, You're going to get the same kind of you know what's on land, you know what's on sea at that time. The fossils that you find, you're going to find ammonites. You're going to, if you're looking in the Jurassic, you're going to find dinosaurs. If you're looking in the Permian, you're going to find therapsids, and you're not going to find dinosaurs, and you're not going to find mammals either.
Or rabbits, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, what was the question again?
From the start, what was the delineation between the rock layers? Or...
Okay, yeah. So it's that balance between the erosion and the deposition, and then the type of environment that is causing it. See, like the Grand Canyon is a beautiful example of this, because the Grand Canyon has been above and below the sea level multiple times. So there are places of like down back into the Cambrian. There's really old rock. That there's Cambrian fossils in there, and they're marine, and then you have areas where
I'm busy, bro.
And then there's areas where layers rather, where it's suddenly like a desert environment, and you have things leaving footprints in the sand and everything, that kind of thing. And then you get back into another layer, and they're back in the water again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that I understand that. Yep. The next question was, has there ever been an example of a fossil showing up where it shouldn't? Perhaps if erosion exposed a fossil and then an event caused the fossil to move to a layer above, such as a tidal wave. So like an ancient fossil moving up. Like, could that ever happen? Surely it must have.
You can have layers go through what they call unconformities. I mean, like, because not everything is just flat all the time. You have building pressure in low pressure areas, just like with weather. And there are certain places, like in South Africa, there's this amazing place down by, I forget the name, but it wouldn't matter. But it was in South Africa, and they're showing this one area where the everything is up and down like this. I mean, you got 7 or 8 visible layers, and they're just utterly crumpled. Every layer is consistent; it's there. Every layer is there, but they're crumpled up, and you can tell that there's enormous pressure bunching these things together like that. And if you have something you want to say that there's something like an intrusion, right? You have you said a tidal wave was your example. Well, tsunami is going to leave its own impression on that and become part of that strata that's going to be identified with that next layer. Another thing that they teach you in historical geology is they show you these different types of like volcanic intrusions, and then they'll show you how there's a number of different events that can happen in any one place at different times that will cause different effects. And so you can have layer upon layer, and then you have a volcanic intrusion that comes up, and then after that you have other layers, and then you have an earthquake, which causes everything to shift. So now your layers don't match, right? But you can still tell what they are.
Yeah,
okay. The radiometric dating, the fossil, and the index fossils, everything, it'll still tell you what layer is what, but now everything's moved, and you've got this intrusion, so that you know that this happened before this other thing happened, because it's not possible to happen in the other way, and so on. For finding a fossil that's in the wrong place, I can't think of an example that could fit that question. I mean, not with the example that you gave, it wouldn't put a fossil in the wrong place. The closest you could have is if something dug a deep hole and then buried something in that hole. But even then, you can tell when that's happened. I mean, there was a group of creationists that tried in the 1930s. They went in and tried to bury some artifacts to be found, because they knew where these archaeologists were going to be digging. So they put these fake swords with all these inscriptions and everything written on them in Hebrew, and it was supposed to convince these people that ancient Hebrew people had been here and had seen dinosaurs. However, I don't know. Maybe it was Mormons. Why else do you want like Jews, in like with dinosaurs in the U.S.?
You'd have to use heavy equipment, surely. Like, it'd be pretty obvious.
They dug a hole and they threw these things in and they filled the hole in. But the thing is that kind of artificial intrusion, you can tell that too, because it's going through this, where suddenly there's this bowl that doesn't match any of the strata around it, and there these things are with just the dirt filled in on top of it, and that creates a different kind of deposition at a different kind of density too. So now this is just dirt. This isn't rock, right? So
is that illegal? Is what they did illegal?
I'm trying to think. If you're just hiding something, lying is not illegal, and playing a punk game to punk somebody like that. I don't think that's illegal.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't think of an example. I mean, I really want to say that it's possible for that to happen, but I can't think of one time that it did or could.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So the next question was, I've read some sources that state that fossils are buried quickly, and other sources have said they're buried slowly and that water has to be involved. And so, what are the conditions needed to create a fossil, or are there multiple methods?
Well, I don't know anybody that would argue that that in order to fossilize, something needs to be buried slowly. That doesn't make any sense. Ideally, it should be buried quickly, and what quickly means in this case is in order to make sure that the whatever it is gets insulated from the weather so that it doesn't decompose, and it's insulated from predators so that it doesn't get torn apart and distributed everywhere. So it's better that the quicker it gets buried, the better for it, and better the preservation is going to be. And there are, I'm sure there's more, but I know of 3 different processes for fossilization. One involves water.
Okay.
So water, as you know, if you make a pot for your plant, you just dump some soil in there, put the seed in there, it's going to stay nice and loose. But if you put water in it, well, now it compacts. You notice how that happens, right? So the water just helps everything drag into a more compacted space. Water does that naturally too, so that creates a better insulation for whatever the body is that is now underground. A really excellent fossil. Two of the best fossils that I'm aware of were both from a sudden landslide, like a collapse of a cliff or something. There's one where this titanosaur had laid a clutch of eggs. One of the eggs is hatched. The baby titanosaur is there. And there's this big ass Metsoid snake right in the right in the egg clutch. But the thing is, boom, suddenly the whole thing is dropped on it, and there's the snake, there's the baby, there's the eggs, everything frozen in time. It's a fucking snapshot. All encased in mud. The snake is now dead. The titanosaur is dead. The eggs are frozen. There you go. But it gives you a beautiful snapshot of how this happens. That's a nice, quick burial. And everything's like still in its original position. Brilliant. That very rarely ever happens. And water will help the compacting, but what causes the fossilization, the part that is slow, is the mineralization, because you end up with heavier elements replacing the original elements. So your original calcium will be replaced by something like in the big stink that people were making about finding dinosaur blood. Well, they didn't actually find blood; they found heme. So what happens when a blood cell fossilizes? It's iron based,
and nothing replaces iron.
Nothing's going to replace iron. So you've still got that iron based, that heme molecule is still there. So
it's pretty incredible.
So the elements are replaced, and you end up with whatever type of sedimentation is in the area. It is now what your fossil has become. And it reminds me that once upon a time I asked my kids, they wanted to ask me for what are they going to get me for my birthday or whatever, and I said that I wanted a hematite trilobite. But the way that hematite forms, you can't get a fossil out of that. So it's not possible to get a hematite trilobite. But it is possible to get a pyrite ammonite, and that's what they got me.
Was that good enough?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a clever way to answer that.
There must be exceptions to that rule of being like, because I think I've seen fossils that have been actually scattered by predators, but there must have been exceptional circumstances for.
Yeah, the first Archaeopteryx didn't have a head.
Yeah, right. So there must be.
They found, I think they found 11 or 14. I forget now. But anyway, it's at least 11, and some of them have heads now. And the first of those, they were for a long time throughout until the turn of the century. They only had 6 tyrannosaur skeletons, and only one of them had a skull.
You're right.
Yeah. So, the predators get a hold of something, the scavengers get a hold of something, they tear the shit out of it, and then you don't have much left. if the bones become exposed when erosion takes away that soil, and now you've got the bone sticking out of the ground, well, now the bone is going to start getting eroded.
Yeah.
I was on an expedition in Wyoming where we're going into the Badlands and exploring the cliffs, and it's always a new experience because as when the rains come and they wash things out a little bit more, well, now you can find a little bit more stuff without having to dig for it. But you need to find it as soon as it becomes available, because a lot of the stuff that we'd found had already been exposed to the elements for months or years and was wearing down quite badly. You know, the wind and sand can do an awful lot to damage your fossil.
I wonder how many fossils we've lost.
I just wonder, like under concrete and under roads and stuff like that, how many fossils are still there that we'll never know about. And somebody wrote me today to say that he had personally discovered some huge fossil in some quarry, and he very carefully dug this thing out. It just said the remains of a large animal. He couldn't identify it, and then he set it aside, and he was meaning to call somebody the next morning or do something with it the next morning. But when he came back, somebody else with a bulldozer had destroyed his fossil and dumped it in a heap of what do you call discarded rocks? You know, that's what it is.
Spoil.
Yeah. So there went that fossil, and I've seen bins, massive bins of fragmentary fossils. You've no idea what's all in there. There's thousands of different animals of different types, different sizes, and nobody knows because you only got a chunk of a femur or a piece of an elbow or a bit of a skull cap. If you're lucky, get a bit of a skull cap. I was in a dig in South Africa, and I found a piece of the skull. It's just the cap of the skull for a Permian therapsid, and I had enough of it that I could identify the foramen magnum. That's it. There wasn't.
I've seen that video that you did.
No, yeah. Thank you. There wasn't enough of anything else. There was not enough to identify what it is. I can't classify it. Can't give it a new name. I would need teeth.
Okay, well that's good, because that goes back to another question that I have. But who should you call if you find something?
Was it you that told me that story?
Yeah, it was.
That was you. Yeah. Okay, that was earlier today. All right. Well, as far as who to call, the obvious answer is a museum, but I would sooner go to a university.
Yeah.
Yeah. So notify the geology department and any nearby university, and they'll know, of course, who does the paleo.
Yeah, my friend was devastated by that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He said it was almost 3 meters long. It was huge.
Wow. So 3 meters, 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. And what's the next question?
The next question was, how do polystrate trees happen? Once again, I've heard different things from different sources, and know that you have explained this before, but have been unable to find your explanation since first viewing it.
Yeah, maybe I should just do an individual one just on that. But polystrate trees, the first thing is they're not trees. They're lycopods. So they are an extinct.
Funguses.
They're an extinct plant that is that was an extinct type of plant. You have living relatives of this plant, but they're nowhere near this scale. So instead of the trees that we're used to, there were these giant lycopods, and they grow in marshy areas. So what would end up happening is you have your occasional annual rains, and then you would have the river would flood and it would bring up all this mud, and then that mud would solidify around the plant, which is still alive, and then you have another layer of mud come up. And these things live for these are like 80-foot tall lycopods, so they're big.
Yeah.
So you can have several layers of annual flood deposit, and they, of course, they all dry out, they harden, they get the next layer, and the next layer will have a different concentration. So you can see that there's different types of layering on there. It doesn't mean that you have one organism that spans millions of years. There's not a single example of that.
Yeah, because well, when the creationists talk about them, they show drawings of them that look like modern trees, like stuck through about 5 layers of strata.
And they also want to give the impression that each of these flood layers took 1 million years by itself, according to the evolutionists. But that's not the case.
But I'm sorry to bring him up, but Kent Hovind, I think he showed a video once of a tree supposedly stuck upside down, but it's probably not. Maybe it's just the way that those.
I don't remember what the explanation for was, what that was, but it wasn't upside down.
Yeah,
And
I didn't think it would be.
And I don't think that. No, the creationist argument was that it was supposed to be that the flood came in and piled all this mud, and then the tree was standing upright like it was supposed to be, and then the flood knocked it over and then buried it in a way that not even a flood could do. Even if there was a flood, it couldn't do that, and that's not what it was anyway. I don't remember. I would have to go look up what that specific, the one that was claimed to be upside down. I can't remember.
I actually only just recently watched your video with Jesse Peterson, and I didn't think anyone could be more insufferable than Hovind. I had to turn it off about 5 times.
Yeah, I was impressed every time he spoke. I'm like, damn, dude, how do you remember to breathe?
and he's so arrogant that he thinks he's winning when it's just like that. His question is so stupid that you can't answer it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's by design.
I don't think he has the mental capacity.
Yeah, well, he might have writers.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of these people are very clever. Some of these people know that they're bullshitting. But Kent Hovind, for example, at one point he made $4 million off this scam, and all that while, and not paying taxes either, obviously. And all that while, he's being treated like he's smart. He's being treated like he's an intellectual.
Well, if you have to give Hovind credit and everything and anything, it would be that he's incredibly charismatic. So he's able to convince people.
I don't know how, because frankly, I don't see the charisma.
I see the charisma. Like if you compare him to his son has no charisma.
Oh, you got me there. Yeah. His son is.
Hovind is a good speaker, and he's able to whip people up into a frenzy and stuff like that. If I have to give him credit anyway.
Well, he's got a very practiced routine, but that's all it is. It's like when you train an animal, and then you expect to be able to improvise. That animal, it can't improvise. It's only capable of doing the thing it's trained to do, and that's what Hovind has been doing.
Some people are incapable of doing that. His son is a great example of that. His son is impossible to listen to.
Hovind has done this one routine for 30 some odd years.
That's probably why he's good at it.
And it's the same routine all the time. It doesn't change. And it doesn't matter how often he's corrected. He can't change it.
No.
Because he's got a 30-year gig on this thing.
And $4 million.
Well, that's $4 million at one time. He's now had his retirement home, his property, his acreage. He's got an estate all built by virtual slave labor. And he doesn't pay for anything. He just send me your money, and people do.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a sad state of affairs. I'm glad we don't have the insane religious indoctrination that you do in the States here. It's not nearly as prevalent.
So do you have any more questions?
The next question was, you said that labs have to know where a fossil came from to date it correctly. And my question was, how can double-blind tests be performed if this is the case? How can you send it to a lab without telling them where it came from in order to get the same results?
Fossils are produced by sedimentation. So you can't get a radiometric date on sediment.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get radiometric dates, or best from mafic, right? Or if you want to get volcanic rock. So volcanic lava flows, ash falls, that sort of thing, correlated to that strata. So, for example, where we were in South Africa, I asked about this because I knew it would come up. I mean, how do we know that the place we're digging in right now, that this bit of exposure is 263 million years old? How do we know that? Because they said it was just over 263 million years. Well, how do we know? Because this layer is above this one ashfall of this one lava flow that's some miles down the road was dated to this time, and in this layer, and then in the area that we're at also correlates with this other ash flow that was itself dated to 263 million years, and we're between these two, so we are somewhere older than that ash flow that's on top of this strata a few miles down the road.
Yeah.
So if you found the fossil, they would have to know exactly where it came from, not just where geographically, but geologically, they would have to know.
So could you send it with a sample of the volcanic rock near it?
You have to have a geologic map.
Okay.
So you'd have to have a geologist do this. I mean, they identify the strata that it's in the geological location, where it is on the geologic map. And it's not just that you take the soil or whatever. I mean, they find all of these lava areas, they match them up to the various layers that they have, and put the ages according to the to the radioisotopes.
Okay, right.
So then it all comes down to, it doesn't matter what the fossil is that you have in your hand. The whole question becomes exactly where did you pick it up? That piece that I found, for example, we had to get a GPS reading on where I found that. So I said it was just sitting out on the sand. I was alone when I found it. I picked this up and I'm like, oh, this is cool. But they wanted to know exactly where it is because we have to get a GPS reading. So it was just sitting on the surface. It's not in strata. It was not in situ. It was just sitting on the dirt. It was wind blown in this position.
Yeah.
Still need to get a GPS reading.
Right. So if you were to uncover a fossil and take it somewhere to get dated, they'd say there's no way unless you know exactly where it came from.
Yeah, because you don't date the fossil itself. You have to date the strata that it came out of.
Okay, right. This goes back to
that's not always easy to do because as you're looking in a strata, in a level of sedimentation, a layer of sedimentation, and then you have to figure out where does that layer lie over or under something that can be dated.
Okay, right. So it's multiple references.
Yeah, so the thing that you're dating could be miles from where you found the fossil.
Yeah. Okay, right. This goes back to what you were talking about before. How can scientists determine the entirety of a skeleton from, say, a tooth, like a megalodon, or a jawbone Gigantopithecus?
Ape teeth are usually pretty distinct. They come to 5 points separated by a Y-shaped crevice.
Mm-hmm.
Their teeth are unique. That story of the Piltdown Man, where Henry Fairfield Osborn.
Oh no, that was Nebraska Man. Sorry.
Oh, that's right, Nebraska Man. Yeah, where Henry Fairfield Osborn found what eventually turned out to be a pig's tooth. It was badly worn because it had been exposed to the elements, and so he was being very hopeful. Let's put it. When he thought that this could be an ape's tooth. And the important thing to know about that was that nobody believed him.
No. Wasn't it dentists that ended up...
there are creationists. The creationists will say that he fooled the whole worldwide scientific community, that everybody mistook it. No, not one person, not even his best friend, believed him. No. Everybody demanded more evidence. And after some years, he eventually conceded that he can't find any additional evidence. When you make a bold claim, you need profound evidence, right? Profound claim, profound evidence. And he wasn't able to produce that evidence. And so eventually he realized that if it was a pig's tooth and it eroded, then it would come out looking like this.
Yeah.
But you often get much better examples so that you can tell exactly what it is. One of the things that is not helpful for fossilization is heavily forested areas, grassy areas, wet areas, jungles. So you find a lot of fossils along shorelines and lakes and things like that, but not so much in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
The level of acidity and just a number of other things that just fossilization doesn't really occur very well there. So you can find a fossil that you can tell is exactly like, say, an orangutan's tooth. To basically exactly an orangutan's tooth, but it's 4 or 5 times bigger than an orangutan's tooth. And in one case, I think for Gigantopithecus, they found 2 teeth in a jaw.
Jawbone, yeah.
And so now they know that they've got something that this is hella bigger than the biggest gorilla. And we know that it's, I mean, what are the chances that you have a mammalian skull, that you have something that exactly matches all of the morphology of an ape, and it turns out to be something other than an ape? I mean, it's certainly not going to be a reptile.
Let me ask something that might sound really stupid. Is it possible that if there was a monkey that had an abnormally large head?
Well, the teeth are going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're talking about an old world monkey, if you're talking about a Cercopithecus or a Propliopithecus, you're still going to have different dentition than what is specific for apes. Because remember that the type of dentition, particularly the molars, which are the teeth we're talking about right now, they're very specific shape and diagnostics. So you're not going to, I mean, you can have other monkeys that would have sort of similar, but not identical.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
so the same thing with the megalodon tooth, I'm assuming. They just find it.
Yeah, you find something that looks exactly like a great white shark's tooth, but it's 5 times bigger. You think, well, that must have been from something 5 times. Something looked like a great white, but 5 times bigger. That would be a reasonable assumption. I mean,
I'd love to see one, but
we also don't talk in certainties. I mean, science has learned that if you make a statement, and if you declare something with certainty, somebody's going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, that's why creationists attack that all the time. They say, "Oh, these people," they're saying that they're guessing, they think
yeah. Well, you can't if you can show that there's a probability there, then you're allowed to say that probably.
Yeah.
But creationists will say probably when there's no probability, when there's no reason to believe it at all, and then they'll say absolute proof.
It definitely happened, or it's definitely this or that. But
if they show a fact that would still be true in either paradigm, they'll call that absolute proof of their God.
Yep, it's incredibly annoying.
And they're all about certainty. Where science has learned the painful lesson: if you don't state anything as fact until you can show that it is a fact.
Mm-hmm. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah. So what you say today, word it in such a way that it's still true tomorrow.
This is the last question. Carbon dating is used in archaeology primarily. Does this mean that only tools or furniture made from wood can be carbon dated? What determines that the wood or materials used were not already ancient?
There are a number of things that you can use carbon dating on. They're not just those items, but because carbon dating has a half-life of, what was it, 50,000 years? Yeah, and so you're going to start getting erroneous results as you get close to that range. So if you're only talking about within the last 5,000 or 10,000 years, that's reasonable. You can use carbon dating for that with some reliability. But when you go into paleontology, then carbon dating is not always useless, because there's some stuff in paleo that's recent enough that you can use carbon dating. But for the majority of it, you're going to need rubidium, strontium, or pure uranium isotopes. There are different types. Uranium to, or what is, I'm sorry, lead to lead. I don't do radiometric dating, so I'm getting these confused. There's one it starts with one lead isotope and ends up being another lead isotope, and that's one of the dating methods. Rubidium, strontium, and so forth. I have interviewed a number of paleoclimatologists. I don't know specifics on how they do that.
Yeah, right.
And neither did the people on the team either. I mean, I was in South Africa with 10 other guys, all named Professor Blankety Blank PhD, but only one of them did radiometric dating, and only one of them could describe or explain radiometric. Everybody else, PhD in their name, but they can't explain this, even though they're paleontologists. So
it's pretty specialized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there with there was a geologist, a retired geologist that was on the expedition with us. And I asked him something about dating the strata that we were on. It was just the two of us standing together. And he refused to answer the question. There are other people more qualified than he that they're not standing there right now. Mm-hmm. But by this evening, by dinner, you'll be able to ask those people. So ask them, which is another thing that's different about science from belief, is the people, even if they know that they know an adequate answer, they're still going to defer you to somebody that understands better.
Yeah, definitely. I
I
was
mean, that's what I should be doing, but you, as you said, you just come to ask me, and I can give you the simple layman's answers.
Yeah, that's what I need because I'm a
Yeah.
layman. I'm a mechanic and truck driver. So I was watching a pothole of 54 video the other day about the reservoir effect about in marine organisms, that you can't carbon date marine organisms because they date at like 10,000 years old when they're still alive. But that was something that Kent Hovind did again. He's a friend of mine actually shared a video of Kent Hovind. It was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but he shared it thinking it was a good thing to say, and I just wrote, "Man, do you even know what this guy's about?" And he didn't know, so I sent him a bunch of things, and luckily he's no longer on his side. So
Yeah, the thing about the evangelicals, the creationists, it's an interesting mindset that I can't figure out. They know, like Andrew Snelling, for example, your Australian geologist Andrew Snelling, when he started writing for the organization that would become Creation Answers in Genesis, he wrote an article there talking about how every fossil, the entire fossil record was as a result of the flood 6,000 years ago. At the same time as he wrote that article, he also published in Mainstream Geology, where he himself had dated the Kungura Formation in the billions of years. And he shows all the stats of how he did it with the different types of isotopes used to get these dates. Professional scientific work. He knows. He knows that he's
what's
full
the
of
term
bullshit.
when you hold two opposing views in your head?
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
They somehow these people think that if you make believe hard enough to convince yourself, then either it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter if it's not true because you think it is, or if you believe it hard enough, then it will be.
Was it you that pointed out that there's a I think it was your favorite transitional form is on in the Discovery Institute website. It's
Against the
described by
Spagna,
two different people on
Paul
there as
Garner
being
and
one.
Andrew Snelling.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've never seen anybody else do a comparison of these. I read the articles that both of them wrote and realized, well, you guys have just both taken the opposite stance.
yeah,
Like 5 years apart from each other, you wrote the exact opposite thing, and both claiming that it's proof of creation.
yeah. Yeah. I thought that was really compelling when you pointed that out. I bet because knowing them, they wouldn't have taken the time to read. They just
It's all about make believe. It's about what you can get the donors to believe, because these people will pay everything they have for this hope that when they die, they don't really die.
yeah.
Now,
I
and
couldn't
I've
imagine
never
anything
understood
worse.
how people can just convince yourself to believe things that are not evidently true, and therefore you know that they're not true, but you're going to believe it anyway. Because like I say, if you believe hard enough, like Jesus said, if you believe hard enough, then you can tell this mountain to jump in the sea, and it'll jump into the sea. You just have to believe it. And so they think that reality will bend to the will of positive thinking.
It's not something I could get my head around. I spent
Yeah.
years trying to figure it out.
Yeah, nor I. Even when I was religious myself, I was not like the faithful are. I bought into things that I was lied to about. I bought into New Age spiritual woo, which just uses faith in a separate auto-deceptive manner, where you're like when you read auras, for example, which was something I was never very good at. When you're training your eye to see just beyond what your eyes can physically see.
Do you believe that's possible?
Oh, I believe it's possible to make shit up. Yes. So you're causing your own hallucinations.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That
Well, maybe these. Do you think that these people like can't have that? Do you think they truly believe what they say?
Hovind is fantastically stupid. I mean, just amazingly so. So it's possible that he could believe that, but he doesn't. He knows better. I mean, he knows that, for example, that we don't believe we came from rocks, but that line will sell, and so he'll say it everywhere he goes, knowing
It
it's not
fills
true, but he's going to say it anyway because it pays.
it fills me with rage every time he says it.
That's why he says it. If you are filled with rage, I've gotten into debates with believers like this where they think this is the tactic. If you become irritated at their dishonesty,
Yeah, I think they're winning.
they think you're winning. Exactly.
Oh man, well yeah, because and I feel that you can't say anything too outrageous about what they believe in because it's probably possible.
How could you say anything more outrageous than what they believe? I mean, come on, magic spells, cursed fruit, talking snakes. How do you get any worse than that?
Talking donkeys.
Yeah, talking donkeys, or the reanimation of the army of the dead. I forget which book of the Bible that's in, but there's this beautiful
That's
reanimation.
Revelations, isn't it?
I don't know. It's not in Revelations, but if somebody casts a spell, he prays to the four winds, and it reanimates all these corpses, and so the bones become
And
wet.
the graves of Jerusalem opened and they walked about.
Well, no, we're talking about it. We're talking about a boneyard,
Oh,
and the bones were disassembled and everything, and then and you cast this spell, and then the bones assemble themselves back into skeletons, and then they grow sinews and flesh, and then they stood up, and that's necromancy on a major scale.
like magic monkeys. Incredible.
Did you have any more paleo questions, sir?
No, that was it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that.
Thanks for talking to me, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thank you sincerely for your support, sir.
Yeah, no problem. I'll keep supporting you.